Okay, we're recording now. Good morning, everybody. I'm Keith, W6KME. This is the Conejo Valley Amateur Radio Club's Saturday morning radio school, and today we're going to talk about Winlink. Andy Moorwood is going to give the talk, Kilo 3 Charlie Alpha, Quebec. He is a member of CVARC's board of directors. He's our technical director. All-around smart guy, you will find, and when it comes to Winlink, he is definitely our big kahuna in the area. So, hello, Andy. Turn it over to you.
All right, thanks. Let me get my screen share up. Here we are. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see my presentation. If I can get an ACK back, that would be great. Okay, great. So I'll make sure I've got the chat window open. If I don't see the chat window right now, but please just shout out if there's any questions or whatever. This can be absolutely interactive. As Keith mentioned, this is more of the whys and wherefores of Winlink rather than how you set it up. There's a lot of good material there, and if you have particular problems with your setup, we're lucky, I would say, that to have a large group of hams, and there's probably somebody that we know has your kind of radio, because the quirks certainly of setting up with HF, it's really helpful if you can find someone which has your same radio, because there's generally some setting that's preventing you doing that. I know that's what happened to me. Okay, so let's move forward. So what I'm going to cover today is a little bit of an overview of how it works, such that we know the different modes, but not getting any of the real details. And then looking at the use cases, how as individuals we might use the capabilities, and then if we're working as part of ACS, ARES, or supporting one of the served agencies, how they may use them, these capabilities, and then finally look at the resources that we have available in SoCal. And we're very lucky here. There's quite a density of resources and a variety of modes and types, so that should we need to get our information out, and some of the local resources are still up, then it's good. And as most things, if you're looking to get back to the wired internet, the quicker you can do that, or quicker in distance and time, then the higher the bandwidth that you can get. But no more about that as we go through this. Okay, so what is Winlink? Well, basically, it's a set of capabilities that lets you do email and SMS, or the multimedia messaging mail system. And you can think of it as kind of like the last mile, first mile way of connecting the internet to your radio to the internet. Over a variety of means. Now, last mile, first mile, what does that, in our terms, what does that mean? If you're using, say, a VHF, UHF, or the Arden mesh, and we're fortunate to have one of those in the area, there's 10 miles of range, depending upon the topography, antenna location, et cetera, right? So 10 miles is a good number for VHF, but there's abilities to extend this through effectively digipeaters, hybrid nodes, we'll talk about a little bit, and also the mesh nodes, can actually cover large distances. If we're using HF as our first mile, it can be hundreds of miles or thousands of miles. HF, I'm usually use it on 40, and it's easily 300, 500 miles away, where those RMSs are. Now, having said that, it's internet, a big internet connectivity through providing mail and text-like services. It's connection oriented, so it's a little bit different to FLDigi, where effectively you send out your broadcast over the frequency, and anybody can pick it up if they're listening. If they're on frequency and they can decode the mode, they can decode your packet, right, that you're sending. So there's a couple of advantages of connection oriented transfers. One advantage is you get some control messages, and it knows if there's errors, and it'll try and retransmit, and if it'll fail, it'll tell you, right? And FLDigi, you send it and it may get through, you don't exactly know. Usually when we use FLDigi, we have a voice backup. We can say if things were received or not. But the fact that you've got to get a connection to that far end, the gateway generally is the case, the RMS, is that you've got to know what that particular call sign is. So in addition to having the right frequency and band, you've got to know what that call sign is, because you're making a call, right? And so there's a specific call sign that you have to use, often with some dash at the end or whatever, but there's some specific call sign to be done. So looking at email, the setup is pretty straightforward. There's a few quirks we'll talk about a little as we go through the attachments, and then the spam filtering ones that come to mind, and we'll touch on those a little bit. But the ones where I want to spend more time is in the SMS and MMS. And as you may have heard when Terry AE6JR were talking earlier, there's a few little tweaks in there that if you want to use it in an emergency, you need to do a little bit of prep work to get things all set up and ready. So let's look at the modes. And when I'm saying modes, I'm not necessarily meaning HF or VHF, but more of the kinds of connectivity. So here on the right side of the picture, and I maybe not sure if you can see my pointer or not, but there is a way you can use what they call a Telnet link. Telnet is a kind of an old term where you would actually talk to a terminal back in the pre-internet age, Telnet. But it's essentially sets up a connection between your laptop or your station here through your internet connection to the servers that are running the Winlink system. And there's two of these common messaging servers, CMSs, that actually manage all of the email. Just like if you've got a Gmail account or an Outlook account or some other internet account, there are email servers, and Winlink has these. I don't know if they're located in Amazon right now or some other hosting site, but there are these common messaging servers, and there's two of them. And actually, if you go in and look where your messages go through, you can actually go and view your messages. In fact, anybody can view your messages, right? So that's why they need to be non-commercial and have how should we say, content that you wouldn't mind your mother seeing. All of these things are available if you log into the system, and you can see how your packet got into, or how your email got into the system, and which one of the CMSs it was routed to. So coming to the left and center of the picture, here we are on the lower left, the client level. Here we are. This is the more typical way that we use the system. You may have your HF station or a VHF station or a mesh station, right? And you're going whatever your medium is. If it's HF, typically now people are using VARA. There are others, Pactor, Winmore is pretty much gone from the US system now. But you're going for your station and connect over the airwaves to an RMS, somebody calls a remote message server. I've also seen it called a radio message server. But that's really the gateway. And so you go over the air to the gateway, and then the gateway takes your signal and through its internet connection gets you over to the central message server. And so, we have a number of people who are interested in doing this at home. Some people have portable setups. I've done that a couple of times, gone to a nearby hill or whatever, and connected over VHF to one of these RMSs and got a message in. And then there's quite a large number of people who actually do this while they're out on their boats, yachting or maybe motor boating. And it's happened that people have got Winlink messages to the Coast Guard when nobody was on the maritime net listening, right? It's usually 300, I think, or 14 right thereabouts. And have been saved because the Coast Guard got their email and then sent a plane and then a cutter to go and save them. And so Winlink's actually history is quite entwined with this this radio society, safety society for maritime operators. A lot of maritime operators use this as their as their way to to get email to and from the mainland, and also emergency messages. Now, we mentioned earlier that what is email? Well, it's text, right, with attachments, and you can go up to 120 kbytes. That's little k, meaning 1,000 as opposed to big K, which is 1024, right? So it's actually 120 kbytes, little kbytes. Now, sending that over HF would take you an awful long time, right? So I would say it's even impractical. HF, you can get hundreds of bits per second. It may be tens of bits per second, depending. Your mileage may vary. And on HF, you really have to watch out about your duty cycle, because when you're going, I guess it'd be similar to just doing a continual transmit on FT8, right? So you're just banging. The duty cycle's high, right? If you're sending, and can your amp handle it? Right, that's something you may want to think of. I know I was doing some testing last summer, and I think it was only about a 10 kbyte file, and I was using HF. It was slow, and my amp is it doesn't have a fan. It's convection cooled. It was getting wet. It was getting hot. So you had to turn the power down a little bit, or I even got a hairdryer on cold, no heat, as an auxiliary cooling device to get a little more air over the heat sink. Now, if we're considering the VHF space, we'd say 10 plus miles, you can get a kilobit. There are some modes that will actually go faster than that. The VARA wide mode, if you've got a setup that can do it, several kilobits can be done. So you can get decent messages through there. Although, as I mentioned before we started, we're talking about a digital mode, but when you're really connecting to your transceiver, if it's going through the audio input, the levels are important, transmit, receive, it takes a little bit of tuning. And frankly, to get optimum performance, particularly if you're using, say, if I'm using like the VARA FM mode, I'll go and you do the tuning steps before, just to make sure the levels are right, because your throughput can really be degraded if your levels aren't right. Now, through the mesh, where you've got tens of megabits, you could send 120K in a flash of an eye, right? There's nothing there. In fact, it would be, I don't know quite how to get a feature request in, but it would be good if we could, for mesh, they didn't have the 120 kbytes limit, right? Because you could get megabytes through mesh without a problem. Okay, so that's a little bit on the modes. Let's talk a bit about some of these things you may see: hybrid and digipeating modes. And we'll look at some of these setups later. But there's a mode called a hybrid mode. Typically, you'll see this with in HF. I guess it could be done with VHF. I've never seen it. But what it is essentially is the RMS, the gateway. If it doesn't have a local internet connection, or if the local internet connection is down, it will relay your message and via HF. Now, to you, it's transparent. Your whole message is received, buffered, and then it goes out again on different frequency, different band. But it's transparent to you. You don't know. You don't know it's going. Now, digipeating. Typically in VHF, I've not seen it done in HF. I don't think it would really be practical. But what this does is it's used to relay kind of like hop by hop from one RMS to another, or from a digipeater that may not have a local internet connection. We'll talk about a couple of our ones in our areas where they're on mountaintops. They don't have local internet connections, but what they do is they basically get over mountains, which in VHF is important. Now, to use digipeating, you have to, as a client, you have to go in and select this mode, and there may be particular call sign extensions. They may be -4s or dash somethings, or dash nothings, depending. Some of our local ones aren't, but it's tactical addresses you. But you need to know that you're going to do digipeating. It's not transparent to you. There are other modes, radio only, relay, peer-to-peer, but for this presentation, since what we're trying to do is get internet connectivity, we're not going to go into those, but they are available to you. All right. So that's enough on the sort of the modes and operation. I'd like to now switch to why Winlink is useful, right? And if we think of our current society, certainly since the last 10 years of ubiquitous smartphones and so forth, we're used to instant communication worldwide, anywhere, anytime, right? Ubiquitous. In fact, you can't imagine not being able to communicate around the world at whatever whim may be. Well, that works very well until something breaks, right? And when something breaks, calling, connecting, communicating with your loved ones gets much harder, right? And so it's a good idea, I would say, and knowing many people here on this call are involved with, some of the public service capability or aspects of ham radio for emergency comms, it's a good idea for individuals and communities to prepare for these disruptions. Like if we think of the disruptions to these various systems that we have, it may be the communications infrastructure, it may be the power infrastructure, or it may be the physical infrastructure. Things are really bad and, we have an earthquake and water pipes break and all of those kinds of things. But, these are the kinds of disruptions that we could experience. So let's look a little more at our specific experiences and context here in Southern California. Here we are living in California. What can break, right? Well, there's a variety of things. So what I've tried to graph out here on the y-axis is the scale of the disaster, or event or disruption, however you want to think of it. And so I've got, down at the bottom here's neighborhood and 12 hours. Now that size there, people will often say they'll talk about a blast radius. Well, this is more like a blast diameter, right? So this is a diameter of how big things can be. And then on the x-axis, I've got an increase in time, right? So, here we are, we live in California. And pretty much every year, whenever it gets really hot or whenever the wind blows really, really hard in fire season, we have to expect we're going to get, public safety power shutoffs, right? And, this is a fact of life now. You think, does the technology exist to make our systems more robust? Yes, the technology exists. I don't think the money exists to do it, if I'm honest. So this is going to happen. And so, during these public safety power outages, what can be the problems? Well, many of us have battery or generator capabilities for our homes. But the problems I've certainly experienced, working at home for over a year now, and I think I've had 2 or 3 of these shutoffs, is after about 4 hours, my internet connectivity goes down because somewhere, presumably, the first box that my cable internet hits runs out of battery backup. I have about 4 hours, right? And after that, I'm down. Now, the other issue that I personally have, and I think many of us, if you live in the Coronado Valley have, is that my cell service is pretty lousy. It's, when I try and run with, with your smartphone, I can try and, run, MS Teams at work. It's useless. It's useless. It basically doesn't work. In fact, most of my calls, I have the extension here so it can run through calls through Wi-Fi because the cell service is so bad. Now, others may have great cell service. I don't, and that's really, driven by the topography here. And frankly, is there enough money for putting up more cell towers? And there seems to be not, right? So that probably isn't going to change, even though, does the technology exist? Sure, it exists. It's just the money doesn't exist. And so, after a few hours, when you're down onto cell service, you may not be able to get messages out, right? And so these are things that happen fairly often, a couple of times a year. we do get some notice, right? So you get some notice that it may happen, and so at least you can prepare. But this is an opportunity where if you want to, get a message out and tell people, hey, we're all fine here, then unless you get it out in the first few hours, you may have to resort to something like, ham radio and Winlink. Moving across, I think we can see small fires do occur. Excuse me. They may have a bigger impact, across a town. And if things are bad enough, you've got to evacuate. And they're, having access to the, if you have no power, you have no internet. Things can get a little scary because you don't know how quickly, hopefully the fire isn't coming your way. And so that's where a number of us have found it's really valuable to be able to get onto Bozo and other sources, so we can get information coming in. The next one is an unfortunate reality of our world today. A deliberate internet outage. There was one at Christmas in the was it in Tennessee, where someone blew up a central office. There's an AT&T central office, and it was basically with also the internet switching infrastructure for Nashville, right? And that meant that they were down for several days, including the the first responder networks were down. They were down, and it's an unfortunate situation. I don't exactly understand why people have an issue with 5G, but some people do. So it's probably not the last one that's going to happen. And you also do get disgruntled employees will cause deliberate outages. I remember when I was living in Northern California, I think it was the AT&T network was taken down by it was an inside job, but they took down the whole Santa Cruz area, right? The city, the whole around there, it was wired internet, cell service, everything was down. Few days, right? Few days it was down. And you think, well, the internet should be redundant, have multiple connections. It does in places, but particularly as we access the network, it really doesn't. And so a break on your line into the internet, or a break, a deliberate damage to the switching infrastructure can take several days to get out and repaired. The Wolsey and Thomas fire, most of us were evacuated during this, and so we didn't experience too much of the disruption, but there was a spectrum fiber. It's above ground. And I don't know exactly where, but I would presume it was in Calabasas, because I sort of worked down in Calabasas, and they lost a lot of quotes, telephone poles. And I think when the poles went down, the fiber went down. And there's if that was your connectivity, you were probably also down, right? So you can burn things like the Thomas and Wolsey fires can burn out infrastructure if it's not unless it's buried, right? And it's expensive to bury things, so there certainly is aerial fiber which is going to get buried. Northridge size earthquakes. Here there's in addition to the physical, to the comms infrastructure, roads, water pipes, all of these things can go. Fortunately, it's relatively rare, every 30 years. But it can happen, and even in these times, managing to get messages out to your loved ones can be difficult. And finally, if the asteroid hits, then I don't think there's any point trying to connect to the global internet. It's probably gone, right? So you're back down to HF frequency watch on the national call frequencies. If that's probably about as good as you can do. Okay, so these are the things that can come our way. What can we do to get around these? So I want to go through some of the steps to set up, SMS messages and so forth. And the real use case for for individuals are sending health and welfare messages. Winlink is a great mechanism to do this. And Terry mentioned it earlier. We had some discussions on the ACS Groups IO list after the the outage in Nashville, that's what prompted me to go and look at how to set this up. And there's one of the hams there, it's basically did a check and said, well, yeah, I can send people email, but my family, they aren't going to look at email very quickly, right? And I checked, with my family, and it's not. We group text, right? And so being able to get a text message to family members is valid. That would be the preferred method for most of our family. There's still people who need email connectivity, like my mom in the UK. My thing is, whenever there was an earthquake, I wanted to get an email to my mom before she woke up the next morning, right? So we're all fine here. She doesn't text, and there are other people who don't text. But certainly, communicating with the SMS and the MMS is a valuable service. Now, if you're used to using APAs, you can also send messages to text in a very simple way. The Winlink way is a little more complex because the addressing you use is specific to the carrier, and Terry was alluding this at the moment a moment ago. But there's ways to work this out. So I'll just go through a few of the slides here, and this is information. I imagine this is going to be uploaded to the CVARC website. But there's a few places you can go get information. I found a couple of different websites, how to do it. Looking at definitions of the MMS, we'll talk about that in a moment. And then also Rob W6RH gave a list of carriers, but as Terry was mentioning, things change, right? And carriers merge, and which one do you use, right? So how do you know? Well, there is a way around this, and here, this was the one list is the main carriers, some international carriers, sometimes is it .com or .net, and the way to do it is ask them to from their text to send you an email to your regular internet email, right? So you can do all your testing on your internet email. Then you could go, and once you think it got it working there, then you can use, say, Winlink, and it can be through the radio, or it could be the Winlink through the Telnet connection, just to check that things are working. So that's a good way to do it. There is one final thing which I'll mention in a couple of slides on, one little wrinkle that you can get. So we tend not to think about, well, SMS and MMS, we just do it, right, when it's on a phone, but it does have some impact when we want to send through Winlink. And also, if you're looking to minimize charges for the recipients, MMS generally costs money. And so that may be an issue or not. So SMS, it's short message service, 160 characters rather. And I think Twitter, the tweet length was set up to be about that. Now things look a little different. So here's a message that I sent to my Verizon phone. So let's see how this works. And you get at the end of it, you get the Winlink disclaimer. So this is public service, blah 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 blah, and so forth. So you'll see that little trailer there. MMS 450 big kbytes. Winlink is 120 little kbytes. So it's going to be difficult for you to receive those messages if it's coming in at 450K, but you should be able to get 120 kbytes out to them, right? So, and pictures might be advantageous, right? If someone was hurt and you wanted to show how mom was doing or whatever, a picture could be very valuable to, putting people minds at ease, right? We're doing okay, whatever. So there is a use if you can get it set up to sending small pictures could greatly, calm people's fears if they know that you're okay. And so a little testing, just be quickly here, this 160 carriers should be enough, right? So I send a whole big text file through, about 3.5 lines of text. If you want to send a "we are fine" message, this should be enough. SMS should be fine, right? We are fine. What, 2 1/3 lines of text. We got through this. That worked out fine. Now sending to a MMS, and this was not an attachment. This was just using the MMS address for Verizon. Well, it's about a 1K byte text file or so, and that just did it. Yeah, it was fine. You know, it could more text. If you want to send a text, actually put it, put text into your email, so you can send pretty good long emails, to a phone using MMS. Many lines of text, probably more than you want to type, right? Literally, for and you can get 120K bytes is a very long email of text, so much more than you need. So you could send a long description of what's going on to someone's phone. That would work quite well. Then we talked a little bit at the start of just before the start of the meeting, how one of the Red Cross drills, I think Stu AG6AG had never used the feature where in the Winlink application, when you select an attachment, if it's a JPEG picture, you can crop it and you can shrink it, right? Actually, in the app, it does that. And so, this is one this is my mom's garden in the UK, and I cropped it and I shrunk it to about 20K. Now, I had some problems here, and maybe one of the issues that I relate in the next couple of slides, but it should work. If this is there's some details to work this out. What I would do is, if I was sending, I'd probably send a separate message. Hey, I'm going to send you a picture. See, it may or may not come through. We'll see. And then go send it. And so I have some more testing to do on this and see why it worked, but I could definitely get it from, I could send it to email. I could send pictures going in, I could send it, but actually I couldn't get pictures out, which is interesting. But there's I have some more work to go doing that, but that was Verizon. Your mileage may vary. So the last issue that I want to pop up, and this refers both to the SMS, MMS stuff, as well as generally Winlink. If you have a Winlink account, you'll notice you don't get any spam, which is really good, right? Because spam could really, really clog up a radio network. Now you do have a way you can configure Winlink. You can decide to not download messages over the radio, right? So you can unclick them if you notice it's spam, then you can get rid of it. But the spam filters are good, so you don't get spam. And so how do you get around that? Well, you send, if your whitelist is like your safe list, any address that you send a message to gets onto your whitelist, or you can go in and you can edit your whitelist in your account settings and set up, accept these addresses. Now, one of the issues which I wasn't aware of, but I picked this up, I think of one of the Winlink groups I own. I've seen Dan. I don't know Dan NR6V, but it's quite active in the area. And apparently, there can be a different address. So you send to one address, but the reply comes back from a different address and it can get dropped. Now, I haven't seen that with Verizon. Like Verizon, I can get in with attachments. My problem is getting out to Verizon. But that may be something that when you're doing this exchange, you send a message or you ask your recipient to send you an email from their SMS or MMS, and then you send one back. If you do that through your regular internet account, not the Winlink account, so the spam filter isn't there, there may be a slight difference in the address and you'd never notice it, right? Well, maybe that's something that you got to pay attention to. And so what you'd need to do is then go and add this incoming address into your whitelist. And if you go on the Winlink site, there's some descriptions, a little description here, you can somewhere in my whitelist when you log in. So that may be one of the things. This is a capability that needs a little tuning, right? To get set up, but very capable once it's done. Okay, so I want to go to a couple of use cases, DYFI, and some of the things we've been doing with some of the served agencies. Well, let's have a quick look. Why would a served agency be interested in Winlink? And so here I've got our, this is, here we are in the Coronado Valley, and a couple of the EOCs that we have in Area 2. There's Los Robles, Maine, here up off Lynn and Jan's. I'm located right about here. And then there's Los Robles East down here. That's been the EOC when we were going to EOC, I would go to. And we have a very good set of links, either through Bozo, or we can go Simplex, with FLDigi. Very good local connectivity. And so if one of these sites has lost internet connectivity, we can get to the other one, right? So we can get that. The problem exists is if we need to help the served agencies with connections beyond the local, like if both of these sites are down and they want some means to get, requests for supplies or to indicate status and so forth, getting outside of the local is where this can be valuable to served agencies, just as it can be for us, right? Because there's this local event, maybe the whole of Coronado Valley's down, right? If there's a fiber cut down here on 101 somewhere, I know my links, I did a trace right out, my links through Spectrum go, there's some box in TO, there's one in Westlake Village, then it goes to Van Nuys, and then into LA, wherever LA is. I don't know where it is, but it's somewhere in central LA. Served agencies may ask their providers to have some route diversity. So maybe one link goes this way down here, another link goes up 23. I don't know. These are things that as regular consumers we don't have access to doing those kinds of things. But sometimes businesses put that into their disaster planning. But I'm not aware of what they do. But if all that goes, then these hospitals still have needs to get information to and from their sites, and certainly Winlink could provide a means for that. Okay, so let's go to DYFI, and this was an activity that we really found out from Oliver Dooley, K3CAQ. He presented to the Ventura County ACS group back in July, and it's a collaboration between Winlink and the USGS to utilize the capabilities of amateur radio operators to get information out of the donut hole, the dead zone of communications, where regular internet capability has been disrupted, probably due to some physical break, or there's, no power, or something's caught fire, or whatever, bad things happen during big earthquakes. So the internet connectivity is down, and but ham radio operators, since we can use RF to skip over the breakage, we can get information out. And why is that useful? Well, they really want to get information on the shaking that's happened, and it's an intensity feedback that we're giving them through the form, is how things shook. Did a wall fall over? Did your pictures get tilted askew? And that helps them work out the intensity of the shaking experience, and thus the likely damage in the area. And the objective that we have as ham radio operators trying to support this activity is to give them timely input, ideally within an hour, right? Send in your report within an hour. If they can get 20 reports in an area, they can build a fairly good shake intensity map, and are thus able to direct the first responders into the areas that are most needed, which otherwise, hey, we're receiving no requests for help from the Coronado Valley. That's because all the internet connectivity is down in the Coronado Valley and nobody can ask for help, right? So that may be the case, but if we could get the information out, then they'll say, oh, okay, things are bad in the Coronado Valley, we better send some help. And so this is a quick review of the exercise that we did as part of the shakeout in California shakeout in October. LAX Northeast, they had an event. I think they started at 9 o'clock. We kept banking hours. We started at 10 in the morning. So we started off here, and here we had, about 20, 25 responders we added in this time. And we got our responses back in about an hour. and they built a shake map for us. There was a presentation in the fall, but I don't think they published those results, but they did share them with us live. And now the DYFI, we have a number of people. There's Kathy KM6MAH. She often puts in a reply each week. I do, and there's a number of us who, we check out the forums and make sure it comes in, and we have a local DYFI at vccom.org. We have that server that Stuart AG6AG has set up, so we see that. And then recently there was a tremor in Oak Park, and I think Victor sent in a report there. I didn't feel it, so unfortunately I slept through it, but a number of people did, and they got the data for that shake map. So next one, I just like to share a little bit of the work that's going on to support the American Red Cross and Aries groups countrywide and even slightly international are supporting this effort. Here's a map of the activity back in November last year. 1,500 operators, 47 states, Puerto Rico, Venezuela, and Canada all replied with a Winlink check-in. And we have an event coming up May 8th, and they seem to be doing a little more skill development. Hence the attaching the pictures of a damaged building and so forth, and then replying to some of the message, one of these request messages, an ICS, or at least the American Red Cross version of the ICS 2 or 13 form. So developing skills. The overall goal is to demonstrate and gauge, right, the capability provided by amateur radio operators to the Red Cross across the country, because the Red Cross responds to disasters across the country, and many of the shelters and staging areas by necessity have to be in areas that are compromised in infrastructure, right? It's easier to take the aid to the people than move the people to the aid, providing it's safe. Obviously, if it's a fire, then you got to get the people out, right? You can't protect. But if it's a tornado or an earthquake, and you can provide aid to people. People typically like to be closer to their homes. They're worried about what's going on at their homes, and they really don't want to go, 50 miles away. So if you can get support to them in their communities, that's preferred. But there may be limits on the infrastructure that can request supplies and give status, right? So that's where Winlink can help. Seen quite often used in tornado kind of situations, hurricane situations. We use quite extensively there. Okay, so let's look at some of the resources available to us. And we, as I said earlier, we're very fortunate. Rich sense of RMSs, digipeaters, mesh post offices are all in our area. So there's a lot of local capability as well as the remote capability through HF. So let's look at that. So here we are in the VHF. I've got from the Winlink website. You can go and search for the different RMS stations here. This is packet mode using the AX25 that we use for, say, our FLDigi operations and packet operations locally. And then here, VARA FM. This is the newer higher bandwidth mode. Now, there's pluses and minuses for both. So looking at packet mode, there are a number of RMSs here over in Ojai, I guess Camarillo, TO. This is the gent. I think it's Rob Golden, W0 DGH, who does a number of the detailed Winlink Zoom meetings and presentations. Very, very knowledgeable person. And then I think that's N6RV over here. And so in addition to these RMSs, there are a number of mountaintop digipeaters. There's Rasno on Rasno. Ojai, I found out is on Red Mountain, which is sort of roundabout there. And then inside the Ojai Valley, there's a number of EOCs that can also act as repeaters. And I don't have digipeaters. And I don't have a detailed list. I imagine it's all on the ACS Aries website, but there's, you know, Ojai Valley EOC, and I guess that's Hospital Ojai, I guess somewhere in there, that can be used to repeat. You know, if you can get up to say if you're in Ventura, you can go up to Ojai and then use one of these other digipeaters to get to the RMS right in Ojai. Now, on the VAR-FM side, we have, you know, fewer of these stations. The new one in our area is operated by our own Rob Hansen, W6RH. But these RMSs have now been set up as part of they call it the South Cal Autobahn project. So they're on the same frequency. And by knowing the particular call sign to use, you can digipete. So here I am in Thousand Oaks, and I can digipete through Rob, bounce through him, and then get to W0 DGH, or similarly, because I'm kind of in a little canyon here, then get out to Rob, and then amazingly, I can get up to here. Bandwidth, or the transfer rate isn't very good, but it does work amazingly. The downside here, if you're going to use VARA FM mode, is that you have to have a license paid for copy of that program, which is an inhibitor for some people. Just for a second. Okay, so next one is the mesh. Now, I know many people would like to get on the mesh, but they just don't have access. Hopefully that will improve over time. But the mesh is an amazing capability in there, and I say amazing for the geographic diversity that it can support. Here on this picture, this is a view of the MeshNet, which anyone can go view it. It's probably what, 70 miles across here, and so with 4 different RMSs over in Sulphur Mountain, AJ7C supports many modes. You know, there's HF, VHF, mesh. If you can get it, you know, if you're in reach of AJ7C, there's usually a mode that you can work to get there. And then our own ORV W6BI has just put a post office in Simi, one in South Pasadena, one out in Cathedral City. So the beauty of the mesh is if the mesh, you know, let's say during an earthquake, if the mesh antennas stay up and running, and, you know, they are directional, and so things can fall down, right? But they are directional, so they're more sensitive to shaking than like their sector antennas. So they're more sensitive to shaking than the omnidirectional antennas that we particularly usually use for VHF. But if they're up, right, you can skip over a lot of ground. For example, you know, I'm here in TO. I can get my access point is up in Rasno. From Rasno, they go direct. They can go over to, I think there's probably into Chatsworth, and then Chatsworth down to W2 JCL. So you could cover, what's that, probably 25 miles of distance with very high bandwidth and get to a post office here. And then what I like about W2 JCL is, you know, if most of the fiber resources that we have, they go through LA downtown, you know, they'll come in and out through, you know, rights of way, particularly along railway lines, some along freeways. There's probably one along the you know, the pipes that go over the mountain to, you know, water pipes over the mountain, but they typically along those kinds of rights of way. And then they come into central switching areas, which for LA, there's some big ones down in central LA. So if central LA is up, but we are down, if you can get to the mesh, there's a good chance W2 JCL is very close in, they'd be up right now. Things can vary. Maybe central LA is down. At that point, probably most of our VHF resources are down, and we're going to fall back to HF. But, you know, every new outage provides opportunity to try different means. But we're very fortunate to have the mesh around here. And then coming back, finally going to HF. And if all else fails, there is HF, right? HF, you can get hundreds of miles away on 40 meters, which is usually my band. I know Keith generally uses 80, but 40 meters here, this is a go-to station for me up here, K6 SDR. there's another station, I forget which one of these, up in Ogden, and then some others I get out here in Denver, but those relatively reliable. Obviously your mileage may vary, but relatively reliable. And frankly, if the world isn't back to normal out in Salt Lake City, then maybe there's not a lot left. So if you can get, if all our local infrastructure is down, you can getting a message out on HF with limitations of bandwidth and so forth is that's your last line of resource to getting out, but it does work. So I'd like to thank everybody. This is things from me. Thanks. If there's any final questions, I'll be very happy to have some. We have an active group both in CVARC and also in the Ventura County ACS group working on digital. We haven't been doing too much on Winlink right at the moment, but we did in the past and looking at different modes. But if you're interested, I'd encourage you to join one of those digital groups and come explore different digital modes. But that's everything from me. Thank you.
And thank you, Andy. If you're done sharing screen there, we can see if we have any questions or anything. I can't see everybody just yet. There we go. Oh, what a lovely group of people to see again. Any questions? And go ahead and unmute and talk. That might be easiest.
Yeah, okay. Andy, Pat here. I was working, I got really enthusiastic about the mesh a little over a year ago, and from my house, I can't see anything. I am in a shadow.
Yep.
Has there been anything additional 5 gigahertz stuff set up in the last year that it might be worth my while to try again?
I think that the last one that I heard of, and it's probably within a year, was something south facing on South Mountain. So I don't know if that helps you.
I think I can see South Mountain. It's the old foliage filter.
Yes,
there are some trees in the way.
Yeah. Well, and in mesh, that's an issue. So you got to get up above those. I'm lucky. I'm close to Rasno, but the really important thing is I'm sort of on the rise up, so I can actually I use an old satellite TV mount on the roof for mesh, and I can get there. But it's an issue unless you're prepared to go fairly high, because you got to find a path through the trees, because you do get that. That is the the blessing and the curse of mesh. It's as close to visual line of sight as we work with our bands.
Did you feel it? Is there a DYFY form as part of the standard Winlink standard forms issue?
Yes, there is. Yes, there is one. If you look under the USGS, the forms, you can go down and go and find it. It is in there. Yes, there is one. And I forget, I may have a few slides, Pat. I mean, if I've got a few slides, AJ, where is your call, Pat? AJ6MJ. I will send you those slides, because it's just a couple of clicks down, but there is one. And what I've done is I add it to, you can put up to 4 favorite templates in Winlink.
I did that on the
Winlink. And DYFI is, I put that as one of mine, so I don't have to go find it all the time.
Great, thanks.
Is everybody familiar with the DYFI form, the Did You Feel It form? Okay, well, real briefly for everybody else, the USGS started doing that a few years ago, where people could go online and fill out a questionnaire on the web about their experience in an earthquake. And what they discovered pretty rapidly, Andy used the term donut hole earlier, is that where things are hardest hit by the shaking in an earthquake, they were not getting any internet reports because there was no internet. And that's when they started a program for ham radio operators to start filing those forms, and they used a form in Winlink to do it, because we're the people most likely to have some power backup and some ability to still get some connectivity from what USGS was calling the donut hole, where the damage was the worst.
Keith,
Actually,
actually
Keith, I
download.
can share it if you like. I could bring it up.
Sure. In fact, it's also handy if you have anything about some of the stories from Whittier.
I also download the DYFI report from the Simi Valley if you want to look at it.
Oh, great. So I'll let me just quickly show Pat. So let me go back. So I created this a new message. So select template, and it's template manager, standard templates. Go down USGS. There's DYFI. I don't know how well this is coming through on the screen.
Looks
It's
great.
fine.
Yeah. And then select that.
Mhm.
And then boom, it goes and finds your browser. And then this is where you go through. So, blah, 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 blah. And then you finally hit submit. And then it'll come back to a regular form like this. And it'll be pre-populated with the USGS. If you want us to log it at VCCom, you need to add that. Where's VC? DYFI at VCCom. Comes in there. Has not been posted. No. Don't need to close it.
So notice while he has that open also, you don't need to memorize that big list of forms every time for one or two that you might look at, but you can add them to the menu bar along there.
Yeah. So that's typically what I do. I say
That's a big time saver.
VC check-in. I tried the American Red Cross check-in. They actually interfere with each other somewhat. And there's the DYFO one there. And so you can put up to 4 of these in your for your templates that you want to go and set. But okay, great. So I'll stop, and then maybe Victor, you could show that report.
Oh yeah, if give me a share screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me wake up here.
So Andy, as far as the
share, should be enabled.
No.
You know what, I'm going to make you a co-host. It'll definitely let.
Thank you.
I don't know what's up.
All right.
Okay,
yeah,
got it. Because this is the Excel table I downloaded from USGS. This is after the Simi Valley 3 point something earthquake. That you can see how many people has response to the DYFI report. I mean, I think it's either through the website or through Winlink. We don't know, but it's a response.
Yeah, they've been running through the web for many years. I think the addition of the amateur radio stuff is new. That's like this year. Yeah, or last year, I should say.
Yeah. So Oak Park is just direct south of the Simi Valley earthquake area, but we have 32 response in Oak Park. I know Diane and Kathy are here too, so you might be interested in looking at this number. And one more thing to share is the shape map they put out. This is the intensity map they mapped out.
Gesundheit.
All right, that's it. Thank you.
Great.
Well, the story I alluded to from the Whittier quake was the beginning of a change in the process of earthquake response that they're still fine-tuning now. But at the time, there were 911 calls coming out of LA after the call, out to other mutual aid agencies. And there were stories of responders from Whittier jumping into their fire engines and starting to drive to LA and looking around at their own local damage and thinking, wow, it must really be bad in LA if they're sending us there. And what actually had happened is that LA was fairly moderate damage, and in Whittier, where it was the worst, they weren't getting calls because infrastructure was down. And the Diffie using ham radio, those go to the USGS, and if they see that there's a lot of reports of major damage in an area, they're able to contact through all the different mutual aid and EOS systems we have today and let them know that there may be damage they're not aware of, that they're needed somewhere else. So it's kind of a valuable thing that we can do using Winlink. Anybody with a, you know, after a big one, a battery and a laptop, and you could be helping a lot of other people that way.
You mentioned all these other systems that they use to communicate with. In the Northridge earthquake, I was out at the UCLA hospital there in Sylmar, doing some professional work.
Mm-hmm.
And if you didn't know, they have a here and the ReadyNet that are designed to connect all the hospitals. They're emergency type things.
Mm-hmm.
Both failed.
Mhm.
Yeah, it happens. I'll leave detailed discussions of that to people like Zach and Rob above my pay grade.
Right.
But that's what we're here for. If they have
So,
the problem, we got to be backing it up.
So Andy, is there a suggested drill? I mean, we do this ACS check-in with Zach, with Rob, using the Winlink
Mm-hmm.
Every week. And is there something similar with DYFI or for a drill, or would we just wait till the next earthquake?
So actually, maybe it's not well advertised, but number of people, we run the DYFI report each week. And so a number of us, I know Kathy's had to drop, Jim, K3CAQ, and then I think also Rob Shank, I forget if it's KM6 RSS. So a few people do actually send a DYFI each week, and just check out the form, make sure it still works. I do it when I do my Winlink check-in, right? I just send it out and I get reports, and there's usually 4 or 5 people who send a check-in each week.
But for that drill, do we send it to VCCOM or to the USGS?
So we do it the same way. So the 2 is DYFI, and it's marked as exercise, right? So they know it's not a real event, right? And then the CC, the DYFI at vccom.org.
Okay.
So it's just the same way, and I usually have my own regular internet email address on there too, so I know it comes back.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just the same setup, right? Just practice the
exactly
how you would do it in a real event. You just do it as a drill, right? So it's just the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And USGS does encourage people to do that frequently. You don't have to wait for an event.
Mm. Yeah, they need to check that the system's still working. They get in these things. It's it was surprising how and I guess I should say surprising, but their interest in ham radio operators kind of makes sense. One, they know who you are, right? It comes from a call sign, right? So they know who you are, and it's a group of people who are interested in emergency communications, right? So you're kind of self-selected and vetted, right? And so that's a valuable source of person power, right? If I think about it, as operators, we tend to think about the modes and the technology and all of the interesting gizmos that we have. But really what we have is a group of capable and interested people, right? And that's what, served agencies and organizations like the USGS value, right? Because your people scattered all over the place, capable and interested, right? And that's why they're interested in us.
On your graph showing the different intensities of loss of service, I mentioned the Allevue Medical Center, UCLA Medical Center. There's probably a few people that know as much about that as I do. I was sent out there as in my professional work, but at the time I was part of the sheriff's DCS unit, kind of like the ACS did. And I had to interview various people at that facility after the fact. It was an after-action issue. You may have remember how they had an earthquake back in the 70s that flattened the facility. And with that history, they built a new facility and they had it hardened. They had their own turbines there to generate power, and they had the administrator had a CVARC radio that was used to call any of the hobnobs in the county. They could turn the dial and talk to the head of any department. When the actual thing happened in Northridge on 4:31 a.m., the administrator had used the CVARC radio to talk to her secretary to tell her she'd be late to work. That's all she ever used it for. She didn't know that she had access to all the people in the county. So when the earthquake hit, the turbine generator, they had a control panel that was booted by a little PC that had a UBS in it, a battery backup. The battery had gone dead, and so they had sent it off to get replaced. And on the morning of, when the shaking started, the turbines are set to spool down automatically. But when they tried to boot them up, they didn't have that battery. So for the want of a nail, the horse's shoe was lost and the horse died. So then they had the 50-gallon, they had the generators, if you recall what happened, 30 minutes, they had power. And this is a facility that has an insane asylum on the 6th floor. And it went dark at 4:31. The generators worked for 30 minutes, and they had 250,000 gallons of diesel in the ground. And the pumps to pump that fuel into the generators were powered by the grid and not by the generators. So the whole place went dark. They had cases of 2-meter radios sitting waiting for training. At the end of the day, people were dying because the ventilators that people used to stay alive didn't have any electricity. And no one, the HERE failed, the ReadyNet failed. The only way they got help from downtown with ambulance service was a ham radio operator walked onto the campus and asked if he could give any help.
Wow. Wow, what a story.
Well, I can hope that none of us will be walking onto local hospital campuses with similar stories in the future here. And all of the government agencies do seem to learn from these events in some measure. Maybe not always every detail, and in time, lessons can be forgotten. But we're there as the backup. More importantly, for what we were hoping to talk about today, what Winlink can do for us is if we're not involved in those things. Just, you mentioned the health and welfare messages, the yes, we all survived, don't expect to hear from us for a few days. I have a little bit of background, not background, but an example of what I use mine with. I've, through practice, got a good network of 80-meter and 40-meter stations, RMSs, that I know I can contact at different times of day, daytime, nighttime, whatever. And picked 3 relatives that are tech-savvy guys, and I send them every month a Winlink mail just to remind them that they're my contact if we have that emergency. I have enough battery backup to make sure I can get an HF message out. And the message includes things like my LinkedIn and Facebook logins, so they can go log in and say, look, I'm Keith's brother-in-law, his family is fine. People on my street have come to know that I'm kind of the radio guy. I mean, we can't really hide that too well with the antennas, can we? So with several of them, they now understand that they're going to go ahead and bring that information for me to relay to my relatives, my brother-in-law and my brother, who will then disseminate it. We hear frequently after big emergencies, the request from emergency services to stay off the phone, leave it for emergency uses. And everybody says, oh, that's what I'm going to do as soon as I call my daughter. Nobody is going to avoid finding out how their family is. It's just going to be a major load on the system, period.
Yep.
So
And
by
the
being able
system's
to
gonna
do
be
this now
stressed.
for neighbors as well, it may be a small drop in a bucket, but it's still that many more calls that don't need to be made. So, and given how even in our PSPSs you find everybody overloading the other forms of communication, I have a packet RMS, and my internet service tends to stay up during the PSPSs. During the last one, I had about 15 people send emails through my system because we were out of power here in Newbury Park for a few hours. you lose something, now you got to jump on everything else, right? So that's, I think, one of the biggest values of the Winlink system is that, you know, we can all play a part in keeping the traffic off the air, making sure everybody knows everybody's safe. And if you're involved with emergency communications, it gives you something to stay busy with until you're called upon. Right, Stu?
MR Ducks, OSAR.
MR Ducks. I didn't know you were from Baltimore. Any other questions in here? That's it, huh? Well, I think we'll wrap this one up. I'm going to stop recording here. And thank you for everybody for being here. And if you're watching this on YouTube, gosh, thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video. And we'll see you in after 5 weeks after the technician courses are done.